Hi, my name is Attorney James Johnson. I am a solo attorney with a practice focusing on very early stage startups and small businesses. I focus mostly on transactional matters such as entity formation and structuring, founder agreements, employment law, and early stage financing. So today I want to talk about founders, specifically multi-founder teams, the relationships among founders on the teams, and the necessity for laying out what are the roles of all the founders of the team, setting forth the relationship, putting that down on paper, and getting that all those factors set forth in the beginning before you start off on your venture. Okay, so with one founder as opposed to a multi-founder team, obviously you don't have the risks or the possibility of disputes or of over roles or what what kind of equity splits people are getting or things like that. It's only one person. They're making all decisions. They don't have to talk with other people, consult with other people, come to a decision or anything like that. Of course, the downside of a single founder is that, as opposed to multi-founders, where you can have people with multiple backgrounds and roles and strengths, that one founder has to have everything. They got to bring everything to the table. If they don't have everything, they have to go, if they don't want to bring in other founders, to bring in employees or contractors who can fill in those blank spots in a founder's skills. Typically what succeeds is the multi-founder teams. The thing with multi-founder teams I've seen over single founders is that with multi-founders, they all seem to want to drive one another. One of the biggest reasons why startups fail is that the founder loses. When the going gets tough in a startup, and it will get tough, will be tough going for a very long time. If you're a single founder, it's easy to lose hope and confidence and just to say, this isn't for me, this is too hard, it's just easier to go back to a regular day job. Whereas if you have a multi-founder team, you have that support system with you already there for you, and you're all pushing each other towards the same goal. The advice I would give to a single founder is know where your blind spots are, know what you can't do very well, and if you either can't or don't want to bring in co-founders, then you want to be the sole founder, then you need to bring in those people who have those expertises as either employees or contractors, but know that you cannot do everything by yourself. Obviously, not everybody can do everything perfectly well. And in terms of the motivation factor, just to find other entrepreneurs who are starting other companies, just sort of have that support system. Again, if you don't have co-founders with you to push you along, find other entrepreneurs who are in that same struggle that you are, who you can then all push each other together. With intellectual property, there are, under U.S. law, there are four main categories. There's copyright, trademarks, patents, and trade secrets. When you're doing research in the university context, the big one is patents or patentable material. Copyright may come into a little bit if you're doing more written work, but the big one is patents. In terms of the ownership of the intellectual property that's generated from research, that largely can depend on the agreements that you may have with your university or your university's rules or something like that. Some universities are very open in allowing their faculty and researchers to take the research that they do at the university onto their own private ventures. Some universities are obviously very restrictive on it, so it's a very much case-by-case basis. The big thing, if you're doing research through your company, whether it be a corporation or LLC, is to make sure who owns that intellectual property. Making sure that generally it's better practice to have the company itself own the intellectual property, because that helps with things like investment. Obviously, investors are going to be more likely to invest if they know that the company owns the intellectual property rather than the founders personally owning the intellectual property. So you want to make sure that you have the proper IP assignment agreements in place with your startup, and things like that, to make sure that all the IP, all the work, all the research that you're doing is going into the company itself. In multi-founder teams, obviously the most important thing is to get everything in writing as early as possible. You don't necessarily need to have a formal agreement like an operating agreement or bylaws or anything like that, but having some sort of founder agreement in place at the beginning is key. Not only to both set forth the roles of all the founders, just so that you have every founder maximizing what they bring to the table rather than everybody scrambling around to do everything. That is generally more of an inefficient way of doing things. But in terms of bringing ideas to the table in fear that if this doesn't work out, who owns the ideas? That again is something that you can also set forth in a founders agreement. Setting forth what happens to all the IP, all the research, all the work that's done if, for whatever reason, the venture doesn't succeed, doesn't take off. Who gets that? A lot of times, what you may see is if before the venture is founded, if people are bringing certain IP or certain work to the table, they take that back. Sometimes you'll also see if the work that's generated during the process of trying to launch the venture, that all the founders get to use it. If the venture doesn't go forth, they all get to individually use it thereafter. So one of the, obviously again, the main best practices in commercializing the research and IP is making sure that all that work, all that research is put into the business itself. A lot of times, founders can get tripped up, particularly if they're going for investment or they're trying to, land a big deal to commercialize their technology. Whoever they're trying to do the deal with sees, oh, the founders personally own the IP, own the technology, own all that work. The company doesn't own it. I'm not going to do a deal with this company because the company really doesn't own anything. So making sure that the company either owns it. So obviously intellectual property is licensed through license agreements. There are obviously various ways that can be done. Usually there's some sort of royalty or payment involved. Licensing an IP that they own to the entity, it can be done, or the compensation can come in the form of the founder's equity stake in the company. So before you get to the point of commercializing your IP or your research or your work, getting to the point where you form the entity that's actually going to sell the product. You have your pre-formation IP, anything that's work that can be tangentialized or turned to IP in terms of copyright, trademark, property, trade secret. That's again best practice is to put that into the entity itself that's going to be commercializing it. And there are two ways to do it. Either the founders, whoever owns this IP, assigns it to the entity itself, so that the entity is the individual or the entity that owns the IP, that owns the copyrights, the trademark, the patent. Or again, it can be licensed into the entity, so the entity has the right to use the intellectual property, but they don't necessarily own it. Of course, with licensing, that means that some sort of money, some sort of consideration, compensation has to be flowing back to whoever actually owns the IP itself, whether it be royalty or if it's the founder who's licensing it, they get maybe their stake in a company back. Then, of course, when the entity itself is running and operating, and the IP is being further refined, further generated, you have IP that's being created by the founders, by employees. It's important to make sure that all of that IP again is being owned by the entity itself. If the entity is the one who's spending the time and the money and the resources to generate that work, they should be the ones who own it. So making sure that you have proper assignment agreements in place with founders and employees and contractors to make sure that the entity owns all of that is very key. So one of the other things that's very important with multi-founder teams is, again, the equity split. A lot of times you have issues where the venture starts to take off, it starts to be successful, but founders are sort of resentful of the piece of the pie that they got. Usually it's because they feel that they've contributed more than their other co-founders, but their other co-founders have a stake in the company that sort of outsizes what they feel is the role. So it's very important in the beginning to discuss what the equity splits are going to be. I've seen a lot of multi-founder teams just think, oh, we're going to do an equal split because we're all working equally. That may not necessarily be the case. I mean, maybe there are cases where, yes, maybe all the founders are contributing truly equally to the company, to the venture, but a lot of times you'll have, again, founders who have technical skills that they're bringing, or they're bringing capital, or they're bringing customers, or anything like that to the venture. That is sort of outsized over just the pure, sweat equity, the nitty-gritty work that any founder could possibly, generally does. So making sure that you discuss in the beginning, okay, what is everybody actually bringing to the table, and what should the equity splits be in light of those factors. Having an honest discussion about that in the beginning is critical, because at the beginning you're all excited to work together, you all like each other. It's a lot more difficult to have that conversation down the road when now there's money involved and you may not like each other as much, to have that discussion and say, well, I think I'm actually entitled to this more. So setting forth, having that discussion in the beginning is very critical. And there are a lot of that you can use to sort of help guide that discussion. You put in, what is everybody contributing in terms of skills and money or contacts or what have you, that sort of help frame and inform that discussion for founders to have. Again, one of the most important things for every every new venture, is making sure that you're doing everything in a legal manner, making sure that you're aware of sort of legal risks and issues that your venture is going to face. And of course, it's true that a lot of money to pay an attorney, $500, $1,000 an hour. A lot of law schools have clinics that are free, that focus in areas. So again, a lot of law schools do have what they call clinics. The clinics usually focus in certain areas of law relevant to startups, things like IP or corporate law. Now these clinics, they're staffed by law students. Of course, the law students are supervised there by their professors who are lawyers. But if a venture is sort of really unable to actually go out and hire an attorney or a law firm to help them with their legal needs, it's a possible resource in some cities. Again, not every city, because not every law school may have clinics that focus on needs of entrepreneurs. But if you're lucky enough to live in a city where that is the case, a lot of times these clinics can be a good resource for you to go to. In terms of starting a business in the legal framework context, the first important thing is to actually get a corporate entity set up. You start taking on liabilities. You start signing contracts, or you start needing to either sell or pay people. In the U.S., we have corporations and LLCs, which are known as limited liability entities, which means that the founders their liability for the business's activities are limited to the extent of whatever money or property they've invested into the company itself. So if the company goes belly up, that's all gone, but the founder's personal assets aren't at stake. To know and research and look into sort of what regulations pertain to whatever business you're doing, making sure that you have the proper licensures for what you're doing at both the federal, state, and local levels, making sure that you have the proper certifications, if you need certifications from private or regulatory agencies. Having all that in place as well is very important. So as your company grows and changes, and your products and your services may change, sometimes even very wildly, from the corporate side, there really isn't that much that needs to be done, depending on how you set up your business. Typically, it's best practice just when you form your corporation or your LLC, when they ask you to state what it is that you do, generally you'll state that your business, your corporation, your LLC can do all legal acts that a corporation or LLC can undertake. So in terms of if you need to switch up your business, your state really doesn't need to know that. The bigger aspect of it is the regulatory side. So if you're radically changing your business model and what your company does and sells, that can affect the regulations that apply to your business. So certain regulations, certain licensure requirements may go away, new ones may come in. So when you do sort of pivot and change what your business does, knowing what new regulations may apply to you is very, very critical. Certainly. So again, when you decide to pivot your business or develop a new product or service, again, it's very critical to make sure that you understand what new laws, regulations, licensure requirements may apply to whatever new product or service that you're developing and bringing to market. Because again, the old, whatever you were doing, all those old regulations and licensure requirements may not apply. So it's very important to understand as you develop new products and offerings, what new laws are going to apply to your business. As you pivot your company or your business and to new product offerings or even new industries, sort of the best thing you can do is to go talk to an attorney who sort of specializes in that industry or that area of law and say, what are my legal requirements here? What are the regulations I have to comply with? What are the licensure requirements I need to comply with? What are the laws I need to make sure that I'm following?